Welcome back, and thank you for staying with Bottomline Africa. Of course, we continue with that conversation on the Kenya Plastics Pact. And with me is still my guest. Joining me via Zoom is Vimal Shah, who's the chairman of Bidco Africa, and also here in studio, Josephine Wawira, who's the communications officer, sustainable inclusive business at KEPSA. Coming to you, Mr. Shah, one of the targets is to ensure that there's 100% recyclable product. Coming from a company corporate perspective, how will you ensure that this happens?
That's a good question, right? I think it's all collective. We got to do it together, and it's not difficult. We've got to innovate. We've got to eliminate what's not recyclable, and obviously we've got to make sure that we're circulating it. In a circular economy, I think the issue is around, can my product be recycled? Now, if it means design changes, if it means changing all the colors to clear plastics or whatever, and then making it easier for recycling, I think we've got to do that. So industry's got to come together themselves, take responsibility and say, fine, let's start doing this. And there are also many best practices. I think the Kenya Plastic Pact brings together global best practices and brings them together to every one of us available straight away to say, here's a solution, this is how it was tackled in another country, and let's do it. So if we redesign, reuse, and repurpose, and then let all our consumers know that this can be recycled, this can be done in a different way, I think we'll just make it easier for the whole recycling industry. We'll open up a huge amount of informal jobs that today are not being unlocked. We could unlock entire potential of plastics. So I think rather than have plastics as a problem and say it's a big problem, the problem is pollution by plastics into the environment. Let's solve that problem by coming together and all of us take responsibility for it.
All right, great. Josephine, coming to you, of course. Given the numbers that you've given us, we still need to attain 92%. And looking at where we're coming from as a country, the informal sector is really big on this particular project. So when you talked about sensitizing in the first place, sensitizing is different. How are we going to ensure that this is actually implemented? Do we need more policies? Do we need to reinvent the current policies, or are they working?
So when it comes to the policy, the government has done an incredible job so far. So we are looking at different bills and policies, including the Sustainable Waste Management Policy and Bill, and what Mao mentioned earlier, the Extended Producer Responsibility Draft. The private sector has also played a very key role. We are talking of the Kenya Plastics Action Plan and now the Kenya Plastics Pact. But from our experience, we have come to realize that there's a difference between sensitization, where I come here, which is a very good platform to create awareness, and then you tell you what to do. Yeah. And then the other difference is actually going on the ground and showing you what to actually do. So, because even when you're, in a class, when theory is being taught, sometimes it becomes, very complicated. But when the teacher comes and shows you that this is how you do it practically, you're like, oh, it wasn't actually that complicated. Yeah. So we have even piloted a project for it. It's called COAST. So those are acronyms for creating opportunities and alleviating poverty through sustainable trade. So this project has been piloted in Mombasa at an informal sector called Chuda. Yeah. And then what we have done is that starting from last year, we have trained youth and women on the waste to value concept. So we have, taken through them a class, process and telling them these are the dangers of letting the waste end up in the environment. However, when you sit down and look at it, waste is wealth, and in Swahili we say taka ni mali. And so we have taught them on concepts of how to create wealth from what is initially seen as waste. Because remember, when you talk of waste, it is something that you think you don't need anymore. Okay. But for some other person, this is something, for instance, is taking a plastic bottle and turning that to, to a decorative item and sold and earning money from it. And then from those classes or the training, they have created business cases that we have also helped them to seek to gain access to financial funding to scale their small businesses. Okay. So we have ended up creating opportunities for them, creating employment for youth and women, and empowering the entire community. And then we realized, even if you tell, for instance, the households, this is how you separate the waste at source. So you put the dry waste in one bin, and then you put the organic waste in one bin. Because one of the biggest challenges when it comes to recycling is, if I'm going to recycle a plastic and then it's mixed in all the food waste, it's wet and dirty. So it increases, exactly, yeah. And also it increases the cost of the process, because now I have to increase to add the cost of cleaning that bottle before it goes to the next step. So separating waste at source becomes very key. But if I separate waste at my house, but then when I go to the disposal area, it's just one thing. So I will end up putting everything at the same place. So we have now ended up, saying we are going to build receptacles. So 2 in one area, for instance, and say this is dry waste and this is wet waste. So even as we sensitize the community and the households, we have also given them an infrastructure to enable them to implement that. So we end up having both social and economic impact at the ground level. And then with time, because the Kenya Plastics Pact will help bring in investment, we scale these projects. And so we are saying solution-based initiatives and projects.
All right. All right. And finally, coming to you, Mr. Shah, for those who are watching us right now, it is the first step. So how exactly do they need to act from now, starting now?
I think very simply, if we all make sure that we become sensitized towards plastic and say, fine, plastics is not bad. However, when I dispose of something, I'm going to make sure I segregate it into a separate pack, and I will make sure I look for a recycler. Currently, there are not enough recycling bins across the country, across the regions. But if I can do that in my household, and I really create a separate bag or something where I can put all my plastics in it, and then make sure I find some recycler somewhere, we will start off, first of all, in that manner, much better. Rather than dump it into the bag where all my waste goes. I think that's important. If we start there, I can tell you one thing, every one of us will have solved the problem. Then, of course, creating more and more opportunities for recyclers. I mean, we as Kenya Plastics Pact will make sure many more recyclers are brought in. Even there are many other industries trying to come up and say, fine, let's do it. So they need raw materials. Let's start doing that, and let's do the